Call came in at 03:47 on a Tuesday. I know the exact time because I was awake. We just returned from a 12-hour patrol outside Kandahar, and I was sitting on my bunk trying to get my boots off without waking Kowalski in the next cot. My phone lit up with a number I didn't recognize at first. Then I saw the area code. Home. I picked up, "Is this Calvin Reese?" It was a woman's voice. Measured. Official. Speaking. "Mr. Reese, this is Deputy Watkins with the Hardin County Sheriff's Department. I'm calling about your father, Walter Reese." My hands went still on my laces. "There's been an incident at the residence. Your father was transported to St. Luke's Medical Center approximately 40 minutes ago. He's in critical condition. Mr. Reese, I want you to know we have a suspect in custody." I asked her 3 questions. She answered 2 of them. The third one, "Will he make it?" She said she didn't know. I sat on that bunk for maybe 4 minutes, just staring at the floor. Then I walked to my sergeant's tent and told him I needed emergency leave. He looked at my face and didn't argue. By 6:00 I was on a transport out of Bagram. By the time I landed in Atlanta and drove the 2 hours north to Hardin County, my father had been moved out of the ICU and into a room on the 3rd floor. His right arm was in a cast, 4 ribs broken, a hairline fracture along his left cheekbone. He was awake when I walked in. He looked at me and tried to smile, and I saw that 2 of his teeth were gone. I had to turn toward the window for a second. My dad's name is Walter Reese. He spent 31 years as a high school football coach in a small town outside of Corbin, Kentucky. He never made much money, never tried to. He drove the same Ford pickup for 18 years and always kept a bag of sunflower seeds on the dashboard. When I was 12, a pickup truck ran a red light and hit him on his way home from practice. He lost the use of his left leg almost entirely. He walks with a cane now, since I was in 7th grade. After my mom passed, that was 6 years ago. Pancreatic cancer, gone in 4 months, my dad sold the house they'd shared for 22 years and moved into a smaller place over in Dunmore. He said the big house was too quiet. I understood that. He was doing okay. Or I thought he was. What I didn't know, what I was overseas and couldn't see, was that sometime in the 18 months before that phone call, my step-uncle Russell had started coming around. Russell Briggs, my mom's younger brother by 9 years. He'd always been the kind of man who wore nice watches he couldn't afford and had a new business idea every 6 months that never went anywhere. Growing up, I remember my mom sighing whenever his name came up. She loved him because he was her brother, but she didn't trust him. I should have remembered that. Russell had shown up at my dad's door about a year and a half earlier, right around the time I'd been deployed the 2nd time. He said he was between jobs, asked if he could stay in the spare room for a few weeks. My dad, being my dad, said yes. The few weeks became 4 months. Then Russell introduced his girlfriend, Pamela, and Pamela moved in too. Then Pamela's son, Dustin, showed up. Dustin was 26 years old, no job, and drove a car that my dad later told me he'd never once seen registered in Dustin's name. He had a way of looking at things in your house like he was already calculating what they were worth. By the time I got home to that hospital room, Dustin had been living under my father's roof for 11 months. My dad told me the story in pieces because talking hurt him where his ribs had been taped. He said it had started small, Russell borrowing money that never came back, Pamela running up the grocery bill and then asking my dad to cover it because things were tight. Dustin using my dad's truck without asking. Little things. The kind of things a decent man with a kind heart talks himself into tolerating because they're family or close to it. Then it got worse. My dad had a lockbox in the closet of his bedroom. He kept important documents in there. The deed to the house, his pension paperwork, about $4,000 in cash he kept on hand out of habit, the way men of his generation do. Last December, he noticed the cash was gone. He didn't say anything at first. He thought maybe he'd miscounted. Then, in February, a letter came from his bank. A home equity line of credit had been opened in his name. $38,000 had been drawn down over 6 weeks. My dad hadn't opened any line of credit. He confronted Russell. Russell said it was a misunderstanding. Said he'd been helping manage my dad's finances because my dad was getting confused. Said he had power of attorney. My dad had never signed a power of attorney. He told me all of this from his hospital bed, and I watched his jaw tighten as he said it, the way it does when he's trying not to show how bad something hurts. I told Russell I was going to the bank, he said. I told him I was going to call you. That was the night Dustin put him on the floor. My dad had been walking to his bedroom. His cane was in his hand. Dustin stepped out of the hallway and shoved him. My dad went down hard against the edge of the door frame. When he tried to get up, Dustin grabbed the cane out of his hand, used it on him. That's the part I keep coming back to. My father's own cane. The thing he needed to stand up and walk. Dustin used it against his ribs, his arm, his face. Pamela was in the kitchen. Russell was in the living room. Neither of them moved to stop it. A neighbor of them moved to stop it. A neighbor, an older woman across the street named Mrs. Hutchins, had seen Dustin's car in the driveway night after night for months, and something about him made her uneasy. She kept a security camera on her front porch. The angle caught part of my dad's front walkway and the living room window. She called 911 when she heard shouting. By the time the deputy arrived, my dad was on the floor and Dustin was wiping his hands on a dish towel like he'd just finished changing a tire. Dustin told the deputy my dad had fallen. My dad, bleeding from his cheekbone, said that wasn't what happened. Dustin was arrested that night. Russell and Pamela were questioned and released. The deputy who called me said the DA was reviewing the case, but that Dustin's lawyer, and apparently Dustin already had a lawyer on call, which told me everything I needed to know, was already preparing a story about my father's confusion and instability. I want to be honest about the next 72 hours, because I'm not proud of all of it. I went to the house the morning after I arrived. Russell and Pamela were still there. I knocked on the door of my father's house, which I shouldn't have had to do, and Russell opened it with this expression on his face like he was preparing to be reasonable. I told him he had until sundown to be out of the house. I told Pamela the same. I told them both that if I came back and they were still there, I would be calling the county sheriff and giving them everything my father had already told me, and I would also be calling the bank's fraud department. And I would also be calling a lawyer to discuss what criminal exposure looked like for people who witnessed an assault on a disabled man and did nothing. Russell tried to tell me I was being dramatic. I looked at him for a long moment. I thought about my dad's teeth on that hospital floor. I did 2 tours, I said. I've had people point things at me that were worse than whatever you're thinking right now. Don't test me. They were gone by 3 in the afternoon. I stood in the doorway of my dad's bedroom after they left. The lockbox was sitting open on the dresser, empty. I took pictures of everything. I called the bank. I called the sheriff's department and gave a formal statement. I called a lawyer in Lexington named Andrew Faber, who specialized in elder financial abuse. I'd found him on the Kentucky Bar Association's website at 2 in the morning the night before, reading through case results on my phone while my dad slept. Andrew Faber turned out to be exactly the right person to call. Here's what an investigation looks like when it's done right, and I say this as someone who spent years being trained to gather intelligence. Within 3 weeks, Andrew's office had obtained bank records showing that Russell had forged my father's signature on the power of attorney document. A handwriting expert confirmed it. The home equity line had been opened using a combination of my father's legitimate ID and the forged document. The $38,000 had moved through 2 accounts and ultimately into a prepaid card that Dustin's phone had been used to access at ATMs in 3 different counties. They hadn't even been careful. The DA added financial elder abuse charges to the assault charges against Dustin. He came back and filed charges against Russell for fraud and forgery. Pamela was charged as an accessory. Dustin's lawyer, the one who'd been so ready with the he fell story, quietly withdrew from the case once the bank records surfaced. I found out later, through Andrew, that Russell had done something similar to an elderly couple in Bowling Green 8 years earlier, never prosecuted. The couple had been too frightened to testify. He'd apparently counted on the same for my dad. He didn't know my dad. He didn't know my dad. He didn't know me. The thing about coming back from deployment is that you leave one version of yourself on the other side of the world, and you're supposed to just pick up where you left off. It doesn't work that way. There are things I saw in those 12 months before that phone call that I will carry for the rest of my life. I'm not going to list them. The point is that when I walked into that hospital room and saw my father's face, something in me went very quiet and very clear, the kind of quiet that comes right before you move. People who've been in combat know that feeling. It's not rage. Rage is loud and wasteful. This was something colder, more patience. I used that patience to build a case that none of them could escape from. Dustin was convicted of first-degree assault and sentenced to 9 years. He'll serve at least 6 before parole eligibility. Russell pled guilty to fraud and forgery. Andrew negotiated the terms and was sentenced to 4 years, serving concurrent with a suspended sentence on the condition that he make full restitution. The bank recovered the majority of the funds through their fraud protection program. My dad received a settlement from the bank for their failure to verify the power of attorney documentation properly. It wasn't a fortune, but it was enough. Pamela took an Alford plea on the accessory charge and received probation and community service. I don't think that was enough, honestly. But it wasn't my decision to make. My dad said he didn't want to spend more energy on her. I respected that. My father is home now. He has a new cane. I bought it for him, a good one. Solid wood with a brass handle. He keeps it next to the kitchen table where he has his coffee every morning. The house has new locks, a new security system, and a neighbor watch agreement with Mrs. Hutchins that I helped set up before I went back to finish my service commitment. Mrs. People, Hutchins for the record, is 73 years old and feeds 4 stray cats and has lived across that street for 31 years. She saved my father's life by paying attention. She doesn't think of it that way. She says she just noticed something felt wrong. That's instinct. You learn to trust it or you don't. I think about what would have happened if she hadn't called 911 that night, if no one had been watching. My father, alone on that floor, his cane on the other side of the room. 3 people in that house who decided he was worth more as a signature on a document than as a man who coached football for 31 years and kept sunflower seeds on his dashboard and never once asked anything of anyone. I try not to stay in that thought too long. What I know is this. My dad is sitting in his kitchen drinking his coffee in the morning, and Russell is in a correctional facility in Fayette County thinking about the choices he made, and Dustin is not going to put his hands on anyone's father for a long time. I've done a lot of things in my life that I'm proud of. Some of them I can talk about, and some of them I can't. But the work I did after I walked into that hospital room, reading legal websites at 2 in the morning, sitting in a lawyer's office with a folder full of bank records, giving testimony that was calm and precise, because I'd learned how to be calm and precise under conditions a lot worse than a courtroom. That work is in the category I'm most proud of. My dad doesn't say much about it. He's not that kind of man. But a few weeks after the sentencing, he sent me a text. It was 4 words. "You did good, son." I read it 3 times on the transport back to base. Then I put my phone away and looked out the window at the clouds, and I thought about how a man spends his whole life protecting the people around him, coaching kids, raising a son alone after loss, never asking for anything, and how the world sometimes repays that by sending wolves to his door. And I thought about how lucky I was to have gotten that phone call in time. Some sons don't. There's one more thing I want to say, and I say it for anyone who might be listening who has a parent living alone, or an elderly relative, or someone in their family who a person with bad intentions might look at and see an opportunity. Pay attention. Check in. Not just a text. Actually call. Actually visit. Know who is in and out of their house. Know their banker by name. Know who has access to their documents. Know their neighbors. Russell Briggs counted on distance and distraction. He counted on a deployed soldier being too far away and too busy to notice. He was right that I was far away. He was wrong about the rest of it. The people who want to hurt the vulnerable in your life are always counting on you not to be paying attention. Don't give them that. I've thought a lot about cause and effect since all of this happened. Not in any cosmic sense. I'm not a man who believes the universe is keeping score. But I do believe that the choices people make accumulate. They stack up, one on top of another, and eventually, the weight of them lands somewhere. It always does. Russell made choices over decades. Small ones at first, probably. Borrowing without asking. Bending the truth when it was convenient. Deciding that other people's discomfort was less important than his own comfort. Those choices didn't ruin him overnight. They just shaped him into the kind of man who could look at his own sister's widower, a man with a bad leg and a good heart who'd never done a thing to harm anyone, and see an opportunity instead of a person. That doesn't happen suddenly. That's years of practice. Dustin made choices too. I don't know what his life looked like before he showed up at my father's door, and honestly, I stopped trying to understand it. What I know is that he chose to put his hands on a 63-year-old man who needed a cane to walk. He chose to use that cane against him. Whatever came before that moment, that choice was entirely his. And I made choices. I chose to stay disciplined when everything in me wanted to walk into that house and handle it differently. I chose to call a lawyer at 2 in the morning instead of doing something I couldn't take back. I chose to sit in a conference room and go through bank records line by line until the picture was so clear that no one in that courtroom could look away from it. I chose patience. Not because I'm a patient man by nature. I'm genuinely not. But because I'd learned over 2 deployments that rage without direction is just energy wasted. The most effective thing I could do for my father wasn't to be loud. It was to be thorough. That's the thing about integrity that I don't think gets said enough. It's not just about doing the right thing when it's easy. It's about doing the methodical, unglamorous, exhausting right thing when every instinct you have is screaming at you to take a shortcut. Sitting with a lawyer for 6 hours, filing the right paperwork, waiting for the process to work, That takes more out of you than most people realize. But here's what I know now that I didn't fully understand before. The work you do with your mind protects the people you love just as surely as anything else. My father needed a soldier. What he actually needed was a son who could think clearly under pressure and not make it worse. I tried to be that. Walter is doing okay. He has his coffee in the morning and his cane by the table and Mrs. Hutchins waving from across the street. That's not a small thing. That's everything. Russell has time now, a lot of it, to think about the choices that brought him there. I hope he uses it, not for my sake, for whatever's left of his. And I think about the sons and daughters who don't get the phone call in time, who find out weeks later, or months later, or never find out at all, because the person they love was too ashamed or too frightened to say what was happening. I think about them a lot. This story isn't really about what I did, it's about what all of us owe to the people who raised us. Attention, presence, and the willingness to act when acting is hard. Pay attention. That's all I've got. Just pay attention.